The unyielding pressure of my military duties within the Tactical Cyber Division taught me that absolute loyalty must be earned through honor rather than inherited through shared bloodlines. My name is David Mercer, and I am 37 years old, holding the rank of Major inside the High Security Defensive Intelligence Center in Maryland. One stormy autumn evening, while reviewing international financial anomalies flagged by our secure servers, I noticed a sequence of suspicious global wire transfers. The digital trail detailed over $50 million of stolen national defense infrastructure funds outed directly into a private logistics corporation. My hands froze instantly over the illuminated keyboard as I analyzed the encryption keys because the lead registered executive was my younger brother, Christopher Mercer. Christopher had always been the protected golden child of our family, whose constant professional failures and luxury habits were hidden by my parents' blind indulgence. I knew that opening a formal investigation would ignite a devastating war with my own flesh and blood, but my sacred military oath demanded absolute allegiance to the truth. I decided to privately drive my service vehicle to my parents' secluded countryside mansion to confront them before the official federal warrants were authorized by the district court. When I walked into the grand walnut dining room, the rich scent of expensive food and the warm glow of the fireplace created a completely deceptive atmosphere of peaceful, upper-class stability. My father was sitting at the head of the long table, laughing loudly with Christopher while reviewing several multi-million-dollar international shipping contracts with immense arrogance. Upon noticing my crisp olive green service uniform, my father immediately scoffed, making a degrading remark about my modest military salary and my rigid adherence to government rules. He proudly announced that Christopher had finally achieved true corporate greatness and would soon secure the family name among the wealthiest elite in the state. I looked directly into my brother's panicking eyes and demanded a full, immediate explanation regarding the $50 million that had been illegally channeled through his company accounts. My father stood up instantly, slamming his heavy crystal glass onto the table and shouting that I was a jealous failure trying to sabotage my younger brother's genius. He ordered me to leave the estate immediately, demanding that I use my specialized security clearance to permanently delete the federal banking alerts against Christopher's business. He threatened that if I dared to compromise the family legacy, he would use his high-ranking political contacts to have me dishonorably discharged from the army. I looked at my father with a deep sense of absolute disappointment, but my mind remained completely focused and untouched by his furious manipulation. I informed him in a cold, steady voice that the law recognized no blood favors and that Christopher's next appointment was with a federal prosecutor. As I turned to leave the room, Christopher was already frantically calling his corrupt accountants to burn the physical ledgers before the raid. Upon returning to the military command center, I immediately coordinated with federal financial investigators to freeze every single corporate asset tied to Christopher's logistics network. The legal retaliations were instant as my family's elite private attorneys filed emergency injunctions claiming that my military unit was executing a personal vendetta. My mother, who had completely ignored my existence for the last 5 years, suddenly arrived at the military checkpoint crying hysterically in front of the gate guards. She desperately begged me to sign a specialized security waiver that would release the frozen millions, allowing Christopher to escape across the border to a non-extradition country. I stood perfectly straight in the freezing rain, looking at her calculated performance and flatly refused her request because that money belonged to the citizens. She instantly dropped her emotional motherly act, cursing my name and calling me a heartless traitor before slamming her car door and driving away. The formal interrogation occurred inside a reinforced room at the federal courthouse after tactical teams intercepted Christopher at a private airfield with suitcases filled with diamonds. My brother sat across from me in a bright orange jumpsuit, shaking uncontrollably as he realized that his immense wealth could no longer shield him from federal prison. However, he suddenly altered his official statement under oath, maliciously claiming that I was the actual mastermind who supplied the stolen military access codes for the fraud. My father simultaneously launched a massive smear campaign through bot media channels, publishing completely fabricated stories to destroy my immaculate 15-year service record. My commanding general had no choice but to temporarily suspend my tactical clearance pending a full internal investigation by military intelligence. I handed over my identity badges, walking out of the building to privately begin a deep forensic analysis to expose their entire web of lies. I spent a week of sleepless nights inside a hidden digital laboratory, recovering the deleted network communications from Christopher's private encrypted phone. I successfully uncovered multiple hidden audio files proving that my father was the true director of the entire conspiracy, having forced Christopher to execute the fraud to pay off massive foreign debts. With the assistance of a few highly loyal digital specialists who refused to believe the public lies, I delivered the unredacted evidence files directly to the chief federal judge. The next morning, during the grand jury hearing, my father walked into the courtroom smiling, triumphantly confident that my military career was over. The prosecutor suddenly played the recovered audio recordings, causing a wave of absolute shock to hit the defense table and the assembled journalists. Christopher broke down, completely sobbing uncontrollably on the stand and confessing that our father had commanded him to frame me to save the family empire. The historic final judgments were delivered with absolute severity, as Christopher received 12 years in a federal penitentiary while my father was sentenced to 20 years for treason and corporate corruption. The luxury mansion and all offshore properties bought with the stolen infrastructure funds were permanently confiscated by federal marshals to pay back the government. I was fully reinstated to my rank of major with a formal commendation for bravery, while my mother was forced into a tiny, rented apartment completely abandoned by her high society associates. I walked out of the federal courthouse into the bright morning sun, feeling an incredible sense of absolute victory and inner peace. My name is David Mercer, and I have officially proved to the world that the honor of a dedicated military officer can never be compromised by family greed or toxic bloodlines. The structural collapse of the Mercer family network did not instantly bring the complete tranquility I had expected, because corporate entities with extensive financial resources always leave dangerous residual elements behind. My name is David Mercer, and I am 37 years old, a highly decorated major within the Federal Military Cyber Intelligence Branch, who had successfully survived the ultimate betrayal by his own bloodlines. 6 months after the historic grand jury convictions, a specialized legal liaison from the Federal Correctional Facility in Pennsylvania contacted my secure command line with an urgent administrative update. The investigator revealed that my father had managed to retain an aggressive new defense firm funded by anonymous offshore asset management accounts. They were launching a massive federal civil lawsuit against my Special Intelligence Division, claiming that the digital evidence files were completely fabricated through specialized military software to frame innocent civilians. Christopher was actively trying to secure a temporary release on bail, while his new legal team demanded a comprehensive forensic audit of my personal electronic devices and clearance history. I refused to allow their desperate legal counterattacks to disrupt my professional focus, so I decided to spend my weekend visiting my veteran operational mentor Raymond at his country home in Maryland. Raymond was a retired intelligence director who had spent 40 years dismantling complex international corporate syndicates, and he knew every dirty manipulation used by white-collar criminals. We sat on his open wooden back porch drinking strong black coffee while the cold autumn wind rustled through the massive oak trees surrounding his isolated property line. I explained to him that my father's new anonymous international donors were clearly utilizing my brother's greed as a psychological weapon to force me out of the cyber division before the upcoming congressional hearings. Raymond nodded his head slowly, looking out at the horizon, and advised me to remain completely still, because a cornered predator always makes a fatal mistake when its initial strikes fail to provoke panic. He reminded me that my immaculate service record and the verified physical chain of custody for the digital drives would easily withstand their fraudulent appeals. 2 weeks later, an unexpected luxury vehicle blocked the entrance to my private underground parking garage inside the city center, and out stepped my mother, looking incredibly sharp and completely devoid of her previous false tears. She walked toward my unmarked service vehicle with a cold, arrogant confidence, holding a thick manila folder wrapped in official corporate seals. She dropped the documents directly onto the hood of my car, stating that the Mercer family still controlled enough hidden offshore operations to buy the best legal mercenaries in the country. My mother demanded that I immediately step down from my position as major and sign a formal non-disclosure agreement regarding the remaining properties in exchange for $5 million deposited into a Swiss account. She threatened that if I rejected her final offer, her legal mercenaries would publish a completely fabricated personal diary that would destroy my reputation within the Pentagon and force a dishonorable discharge. I looked at her bitter face with a sense of absolute pity before activating my tactical body camera and telling her that bribery of a military officer carried a mandatory consecutive 10-year federal prison sentence. My mother turned completely pale as the bright red activation light of the body camera began to flash rhythmically against her expensive diamond necklace. She snatched her folder off the car hood, screaming that I was an ungrateful monster who would die alone in a government bunker, before she quickly climbed back into her vehicle and sped away into the city traffic. I immediately uploaded the encrypted video file to the internal affairs server and drafted a comprehensive intelligence brief for the federal prosecutor assigned to our case. The next morning, my commanding general called me into his main office to inform me that the anonymous corporate funds backing Christopher's defense had just been linked to a major foreign shell company. It became glaringly obvious that my family was no longer just committing simple financial fraud but had actively aligned themselves with hostile international entities seeking to compromise our domestic supply systems. The federal judge handling Christopher's civil appeal ordered an emergency closed-door hearing at the federal courthouse downtown after receiving our new national security intelligence brief. My mother and her team of high-priced attorneys sat on the left side of the room, looking incredibly smug and confident that their manufactured data logs would force my immediate suspension. I took my place at the witness stand wearing my formal dress uniform with my medals pinned neatly to my chest, looking straight at the council members without showing a single personal emotion. The defense attorney stood up and aggressively accused me of using classified government tracking programs to illegally monitor his client's private logistics transactions without a valid judicial warrant. I waited until he finished his lengthy, dramatic presentation before presenting a certified global network log from the Federal Reserve showing that Christopher had actually volunteered his corporate passwords to the foreign shell companies 3 years ago. The defense attorney's confident expression completely vanished from his face as the chief federal prosecutor introduced the video of my mother's attempted bribery inside the parking garage. Christopher, who was watching the proceedings via a secure digital video link from his prison cell, collapsed completely and began screaming at his own mother for ruining his final chance at freedom. The federal judge slammed his heavy wooden gavel down onto the desk, declaring the entire civil appeal completely fraudulent and ordering the immediate arrest of my mother for conspiracy and obstruction of justice. Federal marshals stepped out from the back of the courtroom, placing heavy iron handcuffs around her wrists, while the assembled media reporters frantically began taking photographs of her dramatic downfall. I stood at absolute attention, watching the security details guide her out of the room, feeling an incredible sense of absolute validation because true justice is an unstoppable force against greed. By the time the winter snow began to melt away from the edges of the federal district headquarters, the final remnants of the Mercer family conspiracy had been entirely neutralized forever. My name is David Mercer, and I am 37 years old, a highly respected major in the United States Military Cyber Intelligence Command who had successfully defended his badge and his country. Christopher was officially transferred to a maximum security penitentiary with an additional 10 years added to his original sentence, while my mother joined my father behind federal bars. The hidden offshore millions were completely recovered and redirected to fund public infrastructure projects across the nation according to the final executive orders. I took my seat at my Grand Command console, opened the fresh morning digital intelligence feeds, and smiled quietly because the long war against my toxic bloodline was finished and my true path was absolutely clear. The strategic relocation of my military cyber task force to a fortified deep underground command facility in Northern Virginia marked the beginning of a highly dangerous tracking offensive during the early weeks of spring. My name is David Mercer, and I am 37 years old, a senior major within the Military Network Defense Division who had successfully broken all personal association with his criminal family members. One quiet evening, while reviewing the encrypted mainframe activity logs, I detected a massive coordinated cyber attack attempting to breach our secure evidence database servers. The malicious programming signatures originated from a hidden dark web network directly controlled by the international corporate syndicates that had previously financed my brother's corrupt logistics schemes. It became instantly obvious that the foreign network handlers were desperately attempting to remotely delete the digital ledger logs before our legal teams could permanently finalize the impending treason indictments. I immediately activated our military-grade countermeasure firewalls, isolating the primary server racks to completely block the unauthorized external connections. The next afternoon, I decided to meet my veteran intelligence mentor, Raymond, at a secluded park along the Potomac River to conduct an off-the-record progress briefing. The freezing winter climate had finally cleared, leaving behind a sharp, crisp spring wind that created heavy ripples across the muddy, dark river water. Raymond sat on an isolated stone bench, watching the distant capital city architecture with his usual intense analytical gaze before opening my file of digital forensic data sheets. I explained to him that the international corporate syndicate was now employing elite global hackers to target our military infrastructure networks in a final desperate bid to destroy the fraud documents. Raymond shook his head slowly, smiling with absolute professional confidence, and advised me to view their aggressive network attacks as a critical tactical opportunity rather than a system emergency. He noted that by continuously recording the precise satellite communication frequencies of their hackers, we could locate the physical server operations they were running from overseas locations. 2 weeks later, a heavily reinforced delivery truck pulled up to the high-security concrete perimeter checkpoint of the military research complex where my task force was deployed. A man dressed in an official commercial technician uniform requested my personal physical signature regarding a batch of urgent classified judicial files from the federal courthouse. As I walked down to the secure lobby to verify his identification documents, my military self-defense training immediately flagged multiple tactical anomalies in his nervous, physical posture and the combat gloves he wore. I flatly refused to handle his digital clipboard, stepping backward toward the ballistic glass guard desk while subtly drawing my secondary service weapon from its hidden holster. The operative instantly realized his corporate cover was completely ruined, pulling a silenced tactical weapon from his utility belt, but I rapidly executed a close-quarters military maneuver, disarming him before he could pull the trigger. 3 armed security police officers slammed him to the floor, securing his hands in iron constraints. The captured foreign agent turned completely pale as our military intelligence officers stripped away his sophisticated fake credentials, discovering an encrypted satellite transceiver hidden inside his lining. He furiously shouted that his international organization had already dispatched several active tactical ambush cells across the state to guarantee my voice was permanently silenced before the court hearing next month. I stood perfectly straight, with my hands clasped firmly behind my back, looking down at him with an expression of complete professional indifference and military discipline. I handed his secure satellite device over to our digital forensic specialist, knowing that his failed assassination ambush had just provided us with the exact live tracking codes used by his local handlers. The armed guards guided him down the reinforced corridor toward the maximum security holding area while the base emergency sirens began to echo loudly through the concrete complex. I returned to my console, feeling a massive surge of absolute determination because their reliance on physical violence proved they were terrified. The Federal Bureau of Investigation utilized the recovered satellite location data to orchestrate a massive tactical raid on a heavily guarded rural compound located in Maryland less than 4 hours later. The Special Weapons Unit successfully captured 4 foreign saboteurs, seizing a massive cache of illegal military hardware, high-powered radio antennas, and advanced banking decryption software devices. The recovered digital communications revealed an active conspiracy engineered by my father from inside his prison cell to use his old political influence to secure a corrupt presidential pardon. By connecting my father's illegal jailhouse messaging logs directly to an armed domestic terrorism cell, the federal prosecutors were able to immediately file secondary charges of high treason against him. I signed the formal emergency intelligence affidavit ensuring that both of my parents were permanently moved to total administrative isolation units with zero access to outside human contacts. The final grand jury hearing occurred under unprecedented military security protocols inside the federal courthouse downtown, with heavy armored transport vehicles blocking every single street entrance. My mother and father were marched into the central courtroom in heavy restraint chains, looking completely shattered, old, and stripped of their former elite upper-class confidence. I took the central witness stand in my pristine dress uniform, looking straight into the eyes of the panel of federal judges without showing a single trace of personal hesitation. The defense team attempted one final desperate legal maneuver, claiming that the international assassination network and the server data files were entirely fabricated by my unit to force a conviction. I calmly pressed the interface control display, revealing the verified international blockchain transfers that my father had signed from his cell directly to the hit squad's operational network. The lead defense attorney dropped his legal files onto the table in absolute silence as the chief federal judge stood up to deliver the historic final racketeering judgments against the Mercer network. My father was officially sentenced to permanent life imprisonment inside a maximum security supermax facility without the possibility of future parole, while my mother received 20 consecutive years for her role in the treasonous scheme. The remaining corporate assets, worth over $80 million, were permanently confiscated and redirected to fund national military cybersecurity infrastructure systems. I returned to my command desk at the Pentagon, looking out at the morning sun rising over the capital city with a profound sense of total victory. My name is David Mercer, and I have officially proven to the world that the honor of a dedicated United States military officer can never be broken by family greed or global terror. The formal promotion to the Senior Operations Coordinating Board did not mark the end of my investigative duties, because the international criminal syndicate linked to my family's logistics network was still actively running underground financial structures across Western Europe. My name is David Mercer, and I am 37 years old, a highly decorated military intelligence officer who had completely cut off all communication with his convicted relatives. One quiet morning, while auditing the secured counter-intelligence data streams, I flagged a sequence of highly unusual offshore wire transfers originating from a private corporate bank in Zurich. The digital footprints revealed that a secondary shell company, registered under a fake industrial title, was currently attempting to liquidate over $40 million in hidden assets. This specific bank account had been secretly established by my brother Christopher during his initial infrastructure contracts long before his federal arrest. I realized that the remnants of the global criminal organization were frantically trying to completely withdraw the remaining stolen public funds before our cyber unit could execute an official international asset seizure warrant. The following morning, I scheduled an emergency tactical intelligence meeting with my veteran field mentor Raymond at an isolated operations post located directly along the stormy coast of Virginia. The cold ocean wind blew fiercely across the empty sand dunes, creating an atmosphere of extreme professional urgency that perfectly matched the high-intensity digital warfare taking place inside our secure briefing room. Raymond reviewed the newly recovered financial routing records, nodding his head slowly and noting that the international syndicate was clearly desperate to reclaim their frozen cash reserves. He strongly advised me to actively monitor the live accounts without executing an immediate system freeze, because the network's chief money launderers would eventually have to authenticate the final wire from a physical terminal. He reminded me that by allowing them to initiate the digital clearance process, our forensic tracking programs could trace their encrypted satellite signatures directly to their main communications hub. I agreed completely with his tactical calculation, returning to my Pentagon terminal with an absolute determination to finalize the mission. 2 weeks later, a highly suspicious civilian utility vehicle pulled up to the outer security checkpoint of the specialized defense complex, where my counterintelligence team was currently processing data. A man wearing an official federal contractor uniform stepped out, claiming he had an urgent maintenance order to repair the primary underground fiber optic data lines directly beneath our laboratory. As I walked down to the secure reception lounge to verify his digital identity badges, my specialized military training immediately detected several tactical red flags in his physical posture and the heavy combat gloves he wore. I quietly reached for my secondary service weapon while commanding the base gate detail to instantly drop the heavy reinforced steel blast doors of the main lobby. The hostile operative realized his infiltration cover was completely ruined, pulling a concealed weapon from his service jacket, but I rapidly executed a forward disarming maneuver, neutralizing him before he could fire. 3 armed military police officers threw him onto the concrete floor, securing his wrists in steel constraints while the sirens wailed. The captured foreign agent turned completely pale when our specialized interrogation team stripped away his fabricated credentials, discovering a high-frequency satellite communication device hidden inside his inner coat lining. He angrily spat on the concrete floor, shouting that his international organization had already designated my name for absolute elimination long before the next federal grand jury could assemble downtown. I stood perfectly straight with my hands clasped firmly behind my back, looking down at him with an expression of complete professional indifference and rigid military discipline. I handed the encrypted satellite device directly over to our digital forensics laboratory, knowing that his failed ambush had just provided us with the exact network coordinates used by his offshore handlers. The security guards guided him down the reinforced concrete corridor toward the maximum isolation cells while my tactical team prepared an immediate regional response plan. I walked back to my desk, feeling an incredible surge of focus because their desperate violence proved our investigation was working. The Federal Bureau of Investigation utilized our fresh satellite tracking data to coordinate a massive tactical raid on a hidden commercial warehouse complex located near the deepwater docks of Baltimore less than 6 hours later. The specialized federal response team successfully captured 5 international cybercriminals, recovering a massive network of unauthorized server units, illegal satellite equipment, and stolen defense communication codes. The recovered digital documents revealed that my father had managed to send a coded message from inside his cell, providing the syndicate with the necessary administrative keys to access the Swiss bank account. By connecting my father's active prison communication records directly to an armed international sabotage cell, the federal prosecutors were able to file secondary charges of high treason against him. I signed the official emergency motion ensuring that my parents were immediately transferred to administrative maximum facilities with zero access to civilian legal visitors or outside mail. The final international asset recovery hearing was conducted under unprecedented combat security measures inside the main federal district court, with tactical weapons teams guarding the entire perimeter. My mother and father were escorted into the courtroom, wearing bright orange inmate jumpsuits and heavy security chains, looking completely shattered, old, and stripped of their former corporate wealth. I took the central witness stand in my immaculate dress uniform, presenting our digital forensic evidence to the panel of federal judges without showing a single trace of personal emotion. The defense team tried a final desperate legal maneuver, claiming that the entire physical assassination plot and the server data logs were completely fabricated by my special unit to deny the defendants a fair trial. I calmly activated the primary digital display screen, revealing the verified global blockchain transfers that my father had signed from his isolation cell directly to the hit squad's operational handlers. The lead defense attorney dropped his paper files onto the table in absolute silence as the chief federal judge stood up to deliver the historic final racketeering judgments against the remaining Mercer network. My father was officially sentenced to permanent life imprisonment inside a maximum security supermax facility without any future possibility of parole, while my mother received an additional 20 consecutive years. The remaining $40 million in hidden Swiss corporate assets were completely recovered and redirected to fund national military cybersecurity infrastructure systems. I returned to my command desk at the Pentagon, looking out at the morning sun rising over the capital city with a profound sense of total victory. My name is David Mercer, and I have officially proven to the world that the honor of a dedicated United States military officer can never be broken by family greed or global terror. The successful elimination of the logistics front network inside Baltimore allowed my specialized cyber counterintelligence division to launch a massive coordinated offensive against the remaining international operatives who had temporarily evaded our initial net. My name is David Mercer, and I am 37 years old, a senior major within the United States Military Cyber Investigations Command. One stormy night, while monitoring real-time encrypted satellite data feeds, I identified a highly sophisticated digital transmission originating from a deep-sea container ship operating just outside federal territorial waters. The vessel was using a falsified commercial shipping registration, but its automated digital transponder was utilizing modified, classified encryption keys that Christopher had stolen before his capture. It became instantly obvious that the syndicate's offshore leaders were trying to use this floating network hub to remotely bypass our security blocks and drain the remaining frozen public funds. I immediately contacted Naval Intelligence Commands to authorize an emergency maritime interdiction before the digital thieves could complete the routing sequence. The following morning, I boarded an advanced long-range tactical transport helicopter alongside my veteran mentor Raymond to supervise the maritime tracking operation directly from a regional coastal airbase. The massive black Atlantic waves crashed violently against the jagged gray rocks below, creating an atmosphere of intense professional pressure that perfectly matched our high-stakes cyber warfare. Raymond adjusted his communications headset, analyzing my primary tracking display, and noted that the criminal syndicate had made a critical tactical error by operating from a moving sea vessel. He explained that a secure satellite connection established from international waters required an extended signal holding time, which allowed our forensic mainframe to map out their entire global server network. He strongly advised me to wait until the exact microsecond they initiated the primary database handshake before deploying a specialized military subversion virus. I nodded in absolute agreement, watching the live signal strength indicators peak rapidly as our naval interceptors closed in on the vessel. 2 weeks later, an unexpected commercial container arrived at my private apartment complex in Northern Virginia, labeled as a certified military medical delivery from the Primary Defense Hospital in Washington. When I checked the physical documentation at the security desk, my advanced combat intelligence training immediately alerted me to several severe anomalies, including an expired Department of Defense courier authorization code. I flatly refused to take possession of the package, ordering the facility security personnel to immediately evacuate the entire main lobby while I activated standard base hazard protocols. A specialized explosive ordnance disposal team arrived at the scene within 10 minutes, deploying robotic units to safely extract the package and transfer it into a heavily reinforced containment truck. The subsequent laboratory report confirmed that the box contained a highly pressurized chemical device designed to detonate upon opening to permanently eliminate me before the upcoming federal court sessions. The failed assassination attempt turned completely against the international syndicate when our technical forensics division successfully extracted a live digital factory signature from the electronic components embedded inside the explosive device. The hidden manufacturing serial codes revealed that the weapon had been assembled inside a clandestine industrial warehouse located in an abandoned manufacturing sector near Philadelphia. I stood at absolute attention inside the main command facility, watching our geographic mapping screens isolate the exact coordinates of the stronghold while my field teams prepared for tactical deployment. I handed the verified intelligence file directly to the regional federal response commander, knowing that their desperate reliance on physical violence was an undeniable symptom of their impending organizational destruction. The operational sirens echoed through the secure bunker layout as our tactical units moved out to execute a simultaneous multi-point raid on the target compound. The specialized federal weapons and tactics squads executed the high-intensity raid on the Philadelphia compound less than 3 hours after receiving our digital tracking coordinates. The tactical operation was a flawless success, resulting in the immediate neutralization of 4 international saboteurs and the total seizure of their main assembly gear, advanced server racks, and encrypted satellite links. The recovered digital documents contained explicit data files proving that my father had managed to bribe a corrupt correctional officer to smuggle out specialized tactical orders to his external hit squad network. By connecting my father's active prison communication records directly to an armed domestic terrorism conspiracy, the chief prosecutor was able to instantly upgrade his status to total maximum isolation. I provided my official digital affidavit to the Department of Justice, ensuring that both of my parents were permanently relocated to separate underground containment blocks with zero access to human contacts. The grand jury assembly took place under unprecedented battlefield security measures inside the main federal district palace of justice, with armored columns guarding every single avenue of approach. My mother and father were marched into the central courtroom under a heavy security escort, wearing maximum restraint chains and looking completely broken old and stripped of their former elite status. I took the witness stand in my formal dark blue service uniform with my combat medals pinned neatly to my chest, looking straight into the eyes of the jury, without a single trace of hesitation. The defense attorneys tried one final desperate theatrical maneuver, claiming that the entire maritime interception and the chemical device were completely fabricated by my unit to force a conviction. I calmly pressed the primary interface console, revealing the verified global bank wire transfers that my father had signed from his cell directly to the bomb maker's handler. The primary defense attorney dropped his legal files onto the floor in absolute silence as the chief federal judge stood up to read the historic final treason judgments against the Mercer Syndicate. My father was officially sentenced to permanent life imprisonment inside a maximum security supermax facility without any future possibility of parole, while my mother received an additional 25 years. The remaining $90 million in hidden international assets were completely recovered and redirected to fund specialized national defense cybersecurity research programs. I returned to my command station at the Pentagon, looking out at the morning sun illuminating the national monuments with a profound sense of absolute triumph. My name is David Mercer, and I have permanently proven to the world that the honor of a dedicated United States military officer can never be broken by family corruption or global terror. The official transition of my counterintelligence division back to the main Pentagon campus went perfectly during the calm weeks following the high-profile treason trial. My name is David Mercer, and I am 37 years old, a senior major within the United States Federal Special Investigations Command who had completely neutralized his corrupt family. One rainy afternoon, while archiving old legal case logs on my secure computer terminal, I received a direct encrypted notification from a federal medical director in North Carolina. The digital document stated that my father had suddenly suffered a fatal cardiac arrest inside his maximum security isolation cell earlier that morning. According to the standard Federal Bureau of Prisons protocols, his remains were to be processed immediately through a quiet municipal cremation with zero military or civil ceremonies. I closed the digital file, slowly feeling a profound sense of absolute stillness in my chest because the man who had spent decades minimizing my life was finally gone. The next morning, I decided to take a long, reflective walk around the quiet monuments near the National Mall to completely clear my mind before the next global briefings began. I unexpectedly ran into my retired tactical mentor, Raymond, who was sitting on a wooden bench feeding the small gray birds near the reflecting pool. He looked up at my calm expression, nodding his head wisely, and remarked that when the deep roots of a poisoned family tree finally wither away, the remaining branches can finally grow toward the light without any weight. I sat down beside him on the cold wooden slats, explaining that my father had passed away and that the final dark chapter of our relationship had officially concluded. Raymond placed his hand on my shoulder, advising me to focus entirely on my upcoming senior command board because my true legacy was the unyielding honor I had maintained through the darkest betrayals. His steady words brought an immense wave of validation to my spirit as I walked back to the command complex. 2 weeks later, my specialized federal asset recovery team sent a comprehensive closing manifest confirming that the entire $90 million in recovered international funds had been officially distributed to national defense projects. The local real estate assets and fraudulent construction businesses previously owned by Christopher were permanently dissolved, with all proceeds liquidated to compensate the public victims of their infrastructure scam. My brother Christopher had also abandoned his final desperate attempts to seek an administrative sentence reduction after being transferred to a maximum security penitentiary in Colorado due to his constant behavioral infractions. The massive corrupt network that had once threatened to completely destroy my reputation and compromise national security was now completely erased from the federal system. I signed the absolute final closing declarations, knowing that my name was now completely clean and permanently disconnected from their historic financial crimes. By the time the warm spring sun began to dry the grand parade grounds outside the Pentagon, my official nomination for promotion to lieutenant colonel had been formally approved by the Military Review Board. My name is David Mercer, and I am 37 years old, a highly decorated senior officer within the United States Federal Special Investigations Command who had successfully conquered the ultimate family betrayal. My brother was securely forgotten inside his concrete cell. My father's shadow had vanished completely from the earth, and the stolen millions were now protecting the country. I had proved to the entire world that true victory is not found in corrupt bloodlines or stolen fortunes, but is forged entirely through absolute honor, discipline, and an unwavering commitment to the truth. I stood at the high balcony of the command facility, watching the American flag wave majestically under the morning sky, feeling an incredible sense of absolute freedom. The final morning of the operational cycle arrived with a clear blue horizon, signifying a completely new beginning for my career and my personal life far away from the toxic past. My name is David Mercer, and I am 37 years old, a lieutenant colonel in the United States military who had successfully broken the chains of family greed through pure dedication to justice. I walked into my newly assigned executive office, taking my proud seat at the central command console, where the global digital surveillance monitors flickered with real-time intelligence updates. The long, painful war against my own blood was officially over, the system was completely purified, and my future within the department was absolutely secure. I smiled quietly to myself as I entered my encrypted authorization codes to initialize the morning network feeds, knowing that my true destiny had finally begun.